A new NBC report has come out claiming unnamed U.S. representatives have been secretly meeting with top-level Russians in an attempt to facilitate peace talks for the war in Ukraine. What? Secret meetings between U.S. officials or U.S. representatives. We have to be careful how we frame this because they're not officials. They're former officials for the U.S. government that have been tasked by the U.S. government to apparently meet with top-level Russians and discuss peace talks. So this is from NBC News, and they say a group of former senior U.S. national security officials have held secret talks with prominent Russians believed to be close to the Kremlin, and in at least one case with the country's top diplomat, with the aim of laying the groundwork for potential negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. A half a dozen people told NBC News this. So this was not one anonymous source. This was a half a dozen people briefed on this. So this is probably pretty legitimate. That is pretty significant. If there are some secret behind the door talks going on between high-level former U.S. national security officials and Russians, and what they're trying to do is, it says here that they are trying to get a back-channel diplomacy behind the scenes. They say that the Biden administration is not directing it, but they are aware of it because these are not people currently working for the United States government. So they're former officials. So they're kind of tasked with this kind of like rogue assignment to go behind the scenes in the secret back channels and talk to the Russians and potentially facilitate some peace. So if this is true, which it looks like it is true, if it's true that the State Department, that they are really looking to facilitate a way out and ending, there's some questions that obviously then I think come up from that. One of the big questions is why? Why would they be doing this? They have made it clear over the last year and a half that this war isn't ending without a complete withdrawal from Russia. That's the end of this war. There is no other compromise. There is no conceding any of the land to Russia. They want all of it back, including Crimea and the Donbass, right? That is what we've been told over and over and over again. So do they think that they're going to talk to the Russians and talk them into that scenario? Probably not. Most likely, if we kind of look at maybe the reasons why, is one, Ukraine is running out of steam with the counteroffensive, and they might be nervous about the possibility of the nuclear plant attack, which, by the way, did not happen. But if it's true that, you listen to these nitwits like Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal, who go out there and say, if you attack a nuclear power plant or if you use a nuke, that means NATO, we're gonna trigger Article 5 of NATO, and you're gonna be at war with NATO boots on the ground. That was music to Zelensky's ears. He's thinking, really? Okay. So all we have to do is do a false flag attack on a nuclear power plant, and then maybe we're gonna end up triggering Article 5, and we're gonna have a real war that's gonna come and help us out because their counteroffensive is falling flat and things are not going well. And it just looks like at this point, there's not going to be another push for Ukraine to gain much land back. So it could be that the United States doesn't really want to put NATO troops on the ground. They don't really want to go that far. And as Ukraine becomes increasingly desperate, you raise the risk and the possibility of Ukraine doing something as desperate as blowing up a nuclear power plant and blaming it on the Russians, right? We're going to see, as they become more desperate, increased attempts at baiting NATO into the war. And if NATO doesn't really want to do that, because they're right now, like, they're salivating over the possibility of war with China. So they know that there's no real way to do Russia and China at the same time. So I think a lot of them are trying to pivot. And they don't really want to send those NATO troops in. So they would like to end the war before it escalates to that point, get a peace agreement going before it gets to that point, because that's really not going to be, once we're at war with Russia like that, there is no trying to go to war with China, and that's what they want to do. Another possibility is the investors, the BlackRock investors, for example, they might be really, they're sick of the war part and they're ready to rebuild, because there have been some reports, if you remember this, here's a great article from Unheard, which is a great publication, unheard.com. And they were talking about how, the capitalists are circling over Ukraine, and they're talking about BlackRock investors, how a couple of weeks ago, they announced that they're going to be doing this post-war reconstruction process, And that BlackRock, the world's largest asset management firm, they signed an agreement to provide advisory support for designing an investment framework with the goal of creating opportunities for both public and private investors to participate in the future reconstruction and recovery of the Ukrainian economy. JP Morgan has also been brought in on this. So you might have, BlackRock and JP Morgan salivating saying, when can we get started on the reconstruction? Because we got money to be made. We're not making money on the war. And if you debilitate Ukraine any more than you have, and if Russia gains even more land, we're going to have less to work with. So it's better for the investors to have more to work with. They want more land to work with, and they would like to get started sooner than later, and they could get their grips and their claws into Ukraine, get those investments going, which essentially means that they would own Ukraine because Ukraine would be in massive debt to BlackRock and JP Morgan. So that could be one of the reasons why they're really wanting to maybe come to a peace agreement, is because they want to start the investment process. Also, Russia isn't collapsing like they hoped. Here's another article from Unheard. Russia's economy is actually outperforming Germany's. Virtually every forecast, whether it concerns the war in Ukraine, the economic outlook, or the strength of far-right parties, has a tendency to end up worse than expected. The one thing that is running better than expected is the Russian economy, with the country's GDP growth currently outperforming Germany's. So the whole idea that sanctions and just really putting them into an endless war, it's not working. So if that's not working and they're only doing well in this situation, and they are starting to strengthen their relationships with what would be U.S. allies who are not wanting to be U.S. allies as much anymore because they're seeing what we do to other countries, that's only strengthening Russia's position on the geopolitical stage. And so there could be a real desire to end this war in order to halt that, really the counterproductive process of Russia actually gaining more allies, Russia actually growing its economy, all of these things. So I think there's definitely some, we're not seeing real benefit as much to the war continuing on as much as they maybe thought there would be benefit. Of course, the military-industrial complex always wants wars to go on and on and on, but there's other players, banks are bigger players, and just the geopolitical stage, the shift in the alliances that we're seeing with OPEC countries, China, a lot of these, India's not really, Israel's even one foot in both sides. So you've got allies are not joining the United States and the West as much as maybe the West and NATO, the United States really thought they would. So, however, what would obviously it's not politically expedient to do this. This is really going to upset a lot of the liberals and the warmongers who said the only victory was a complete Russian withdrawal from Ukraine. So the people that were fed that narrative for the last year and a half are going to have, there's going to be a lot of juggling of and smoothing, how they're going to smooth the feelings of these people that they told for the longest time, this is the only way to win. This is it. This is the only way we're going to go about it. So we'll see how this unfolds, but it does look like, especially with the counteroffensive not going as well as they thought, the Ukrainians are not gaining ground like they'd hoped. It does look like this is the end. This is the beginning of the end. All right, many are worried that the dollar may be in trouble. The world is turning away from the U.S. They're shoring themselves up to avoid sanctions and other economic fallouts. We've seen OPEC countries banding together saying they don't want to trade oil only in dollars. And this has a lot of people worried about the future of their retirement accounts. The fact is there is one asset that has withstood economic upheaval and has a history of being incredibly stable, and that is gold. And you can own it in a tax-sheltered retirement account with the help of Birch Gold. That's right, Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k, maybe from a previous employer, into an IRA in gold. And the best part is you don't pay a penny out of pocket. So just visit birchgold.com/Kim for your free info kit. They're going to hold your hand through the whole process. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers. So visit birchgold.com/Kim to get your free info kit on gold.